Welcome to Love's the Magic. I am Moriah Fey, the Love Promoter. It is my extreme honor to have Lewis Brown Griggs with us today. And I want to tell you something about Lewis. Lewis grew up in America as a privileged kid. And he had the attitude and the mentality of that, he admits, of better than and less than. And then he had two near-death experiences and he got it. That we are all equal, that we are all wonderful. For the past 30 years, he has been working with over 6,000 corporations, educational and government agencies and nonprofit agencies to work with their relationship issues, their cultural issues. So Lewis's work, really the bottom line is that he teaches and he works with respecting the differences. And this is love in action. This is important. So let's hear it for Lewis, and here he is, the legend of diversity, he has been called.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much for being here, Lewis.
My pleasure.
I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thanks.
So let's start first of all with your near-death experiences. Everybody's going to be fascinated with hearing details about that.
Well, it was long ago in March '77 when I totaled my automobile and my soul or spirit just flew right out of the car in a white tornado through the tunnel we hear about into pure white light and total peace and total grace, skipping all the steps that many other people do go through. And instead of my having a choice to stay there or come back, I was told in the voice of a conversation with God, as some people call it, Lewis, you're called here to have this conversation and be sent back because you're not doing your work.
Were you disappointed? I know that feels very good. I've heard that.
No, there's no disappointment when you're in pure light and peace and grace.
So you didn't want to stay there?
I was there, that you're in such present that I was not wishing I were elsewhere. So that once you're called into pure light, you release immediately and just have the gift of all of the grace and the peace. And then I had this conversation in which I was told that I had to be sent back to do my work. So
did you know what that was?
I hadn't a clue, of course. I thought I was doing fine, thank you. And so I said, well, what is my work? And I was asked, well, what is it that keeps you from being all you are capable of being? And I really hadn't known, except you just essentially gave the answer. Being raised with enough privilege and love and education, I did know that even though we're all one under God, I had some lucky gifts. And so with noblesse oblige, my job, I thought, was to give back. That's ethical. Many people do that. However, I also got, since I was trying to answer the question of what really keeps me from being fully all I'm able to be, which is different than the charity of helping you and others be what you're supposed to be, right? So I had to go more deeply, and I got that because I was raised with privilege, even though I was told we're all one under God, I didn't really know how to bridge the gap between my difference and yours. There wasn't really a judgment about one being so much better than the other, but that the difference was so great that I couldn't bridge the gap and connect soul to soul.
And in your talk, it made such an impression on me too, because you stated that that was a lonely feeling for you.
Yes, because I felt isolated with my differences and everybody else being different. And if I couldn't bridge the gap, then I was trapped in my own isolation.
Yes.
So all of this is my own work, as I hope we all are learning. Each of us has our own work that enables us to become our fullest self. My work was, how do I bridge the gap between my soul and yours so that I can value the oneness that I discovered in the white light from which we all come, and the oneness and the similarity that we each have at the spirit level, and no conflict, then simultaneously value whatever differences we have in the human form as actual gifts to one another.
It's a balancing act.
It's constant. It's an integration.
It is an integration.
Even better than just balancing.
Yes, yes.
Because balancing is sort of, we put up with parts of each other.
That's true.
No, we really integrate our oneness and the differences that are gifts to one another toward whatever our common goal is. In the workplace, in a team, at home, in a love relationship with children at the grocery store. Everywhere we are simultaneously one and uniquely different, with the chance to value those differences and co-create whatever the greatest opportunity is we have. That's called love.
Yes, it is. Now, this is what you got when did this develop when you came back, or did you bring this back, or did you come back knowing that you had to do your job, not sure what it was, and this evolved?
Great question.
Is that what happened?
In the light, I got what my work was, that I needed to learn how to bridge the gap. Once I got that was my work, I was sent back immediately, and I started to notice, with no consciousness of how I was going to do this work, that instead of me controlling which doors open and closed, I started to notice that doors opened on their own or closed on their own. That was one major learning for this guy.
Yeah.
And that when I noticed that, I could then begin to go through the doors that opened and then use whatever skills I had to be an appropriate part of co-creation through that open door.
You must have just had to stay in a total state of trust.
Endlessly.
Yes.
Which means endless work to
That's
notice
exciting.
when I'm not. It is
Yes.
exciting, and once we get it, and I'm in human form, so I slip often and forget that. However, once we really do get that that is the process and the challenges are the gifts for learning, then we experience differences and challenges as opportunities for learning instead of as threats.
Yes.
And if we can do that in every relationship, from the boardroom to the bedroom,
Yes.
or at the grocery store,
Yes.
then we can experience these differences as reasons for us to be together so as to solve them co-creatively, so that we each benefit mutually from the learning that comes from the co-creation of this solution based on our differences as gifts. It's an entirely different attitude, and it's an energy and it's a spirit of love. It's not a behavioral skill that you practice but you don't feel. You start by being with the feeling, and then let the actions and the doing follow that.
Now, Lewis, you've had a remarkable experience, actually experiencing being part of the whole. You go in with your work that you've been doing. You work with all kinds of agencies, all kinds of different people, cultures, families. How do you teach them that? How do you teach them how to function from the whole?
Well, great. The most humble and authentic answer is I'm always doing my own work. So I have to be on my own growing edge, noticing my own authenticity, okay? And then from there, notice the shoes in which the people stand with whom I'm now interacting. Understand, stand under, be in their shoes, notice where they are, because nobody changes, not you or I, except from where we now stand, okay? So from my own authenticity, I have to notice yours, and then not necessarily talk the language of spirit and energy if that's not what you're ready to hear. If what we need to do is solve this team issue and this common goal, and what differences you and I have to achieve that common goal, that feels to them more practical and less spiritual.
Yeah.
However, it is spiritual, not religious. That's why I hesitate in the use of the word that way. It's about human energy and spirit co-creating whatever response we want to have to every learning situation in which we find ourselves.
You go in with just such remarkable experience and energy, and you have done so much with your work. Please talk to us, tell the viewers about your work with diversity. Initially, we'll start with that.
Well, it started because of my ethnocentrism, with having to notice the vast difference of foreignness first, because we can't be in denial, we Americans, of all of our own diversity, when we meet the Japanese or the Mexicans or the Arabs or anywhere on earth. The differences are so great that it doesn't do us any good to treat each other the same, okay, as if we're 60s kids trying to be fair and equitable to one another.
Right.
So it started with vast differences of around the globe, and videos called Going International and a book called Going International, and teaching us to deal with those differences. However, then
and this is a book, excuse me, this is a book you wrote, Going International.
Co-wrote. I never did anything alone. I co-created
And what's the
books.
name, why we're on your books, what's the name of your other book?
Valuing Diversity.
Valuing Diversity.
Which is domestic cultural differences, essentially.
Okay.
So it started with the international, and then once that consciousness opened a trap door, I like to say, between my head and heart, I realized, whoa, if I'm that ethnocentric around the world, what about right here with you and every human I meet? the same discomfort and bias happens for all of us, from whatever tribe we come from, across our differences. So valuing our diversity as a gift to one another, which is very different energy than AAEEO and equal compliance, you know, fairness and equity for you people. That's a very different legal energy. That's not the work I do.
It's respect.
It's total respect for each of our differences.
And that's the basis of every relationship, every relationship.
Every relationship. You're stuck in that body, I'm stuck in this body with all the gifts of your spirit and your soul, the oneness that we have in common, and the differences in this DNA and life experiences. And those are different perspectives that are each pieces of a truth large enough to encompass both of them. So every time we meet anybody, now we have something in common, oneness, we have differences, and we have some common goal, some purpose for being here.
And that your work is based on that.
It's always based on that, is what is our common goal, so we don't fight about it, we don't argue about it. What are we here to co-create together?
Now your programs are, you give them in CDs, people...
Everything, yes, they're DVDs.
DVDs.
The videos
right.
are now DVDs.
Okay.
And they're books.
And
they're
you've
print,
produced them.
Yes, and they're
award-winning.
They all are. They're really well done.
That's wonderful.
And then seminars and workshops or, to work in small groups, or even one-on-one executive coaching I now do as a certified coach and coach in leadership, because the difference between being a trainer who has the answers for a client who doesn't, and a coach who has no answers because the answers are all within the client, it was another wonderful thing to learn. So, so it's a very different attitude and perspective about how we co-create the solution toward whatever the situation is that you are trying to solve.
That's exciting.
It's fun, much more fun, because then I don't have to be right anymore.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You're right, and we're going to discover how right you are. And how
So you work with different cultures. You work with interpersonally. You work with individuals and their
yes, and families or couples in relationship. It's one of my greatest passions. Is how do we as a couple also value our differences and realize we're called here together, chosen to be together, because of opportunities, not only similarity and oneness, but opportunities through which we learn from one another. Because you have some gifts that I don't, and I have some gifts you don't as much, and we co-create a learning from those differences, which shouldn't be perceived of as conflicts and problems.
Oh, that's
they
so
should
important.
be perceived of as opportunities to grow.
Okay, I want everybody to hear this. Okay, this is so important, appreciating the differences.
It's called love.
Love. That's so beautiful. Right. So within your, when I was listening to you talk, I was just so impressed with the love that you were speaking about your wife.
And my daughter,
and
or children,
and your
or
son,
actually anyone. It's all different forms of love.
Right.
But that I gained really, again, not from behavioral compliance, but from being in the light, where I learned we are all one. It is pure love and light and truth and grace and words that still aren't enough.
Yes.
And so I brought that back with me. And again, I'm in human form. I slip often, but at least when I slip, I'm able to notice that I'm the one slipping. Just as you are. Notice I'm the one slipping, or we take turns. But yes, just the fact that we can love from the spirit level and the soul level to one another's spirit and soul level. Not loving the romance or the body or the sexuality or the intelligence or the power, or to love at a spirit level.
Yes.
The reason we are here together, and have intimacy with no power in the relationship and no sexual energy in the relationship, except the one with whom you're monogamous at home, if that's my bias anyway. But in all relationships with no power and no sexuality, there needs to be deep intimacy of spirit and soul connection.
Yes.
That is, I see you,
yes.
and I feel seen by you.
Yes.
And with that, we can co-create much more than if we're in conflict with one another.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Lewis.
It's so much easier.
It is so much easier.
I'm still learning. We're all still learning.
Yes, when we realize our magnificence and we realize everyone else's magnificence and we're all one and we're all great and everybody's got their great stuff.
Such a relief.
It is a relief. Now, you were talking about with your wife, but in particular, I wanted to get back to this. You were talking about the love that you combine the spiritual love and the heart love. Please talk about that for a minute in terms of keeping that love alive and the fire alive.
Absolutely, because by coming back with that and then meeting my life partner over the past 10 years, I realized when I met her that we are called together to do this work, to meet soul to soul and to each improve our individual selves so that from there we can co-create a loving relationship that then has partnership. In some ways, we have separate parts of our life. You have your work, I have my work. But if we share a home, or a place we live, or if we co-create anything together, there needs to be a spiritual connection in that partnership, which is very loving. And it has to be driven by that, as I said, not by the superficial attraction of the romance or the sexuality. And that was new for me, having come out of my second near-death experience, to know that I was never again going to be driven by anything except the soul and the spirit connection first. And then all the rest is gravy.
Do you ever slip in that? Do you ever
of course
take it for granted or find yourself doing that?
I slip often. I'm in human form.
How do you bring yourself back to center?
Either I'm able to do it soon enough and notice, I'm the one slipping, and it doesn't even have to be mentioned because I notice the disconnection happen.
Okay, so you notice a disconnect.
Yes, and I find it's easier, actually, if I can notice how I just contributed to it first, instead of proving that you did it first. It doesn't mean I'm always perfect at it, but that's what I try to do and am able to do pretty well. And if I can do that and if you can do that, then instead of getting in conflict, we can stay in co-creation and improve, evolve our relationship into a higher level, or as Rumi said, out in that field with no rightness and no wrongness, that field where neither of us has ever been, meet me there.
Yes.
That's my goal. In every relationship, whether it be with my partner, or my daughter, or you, or at the grocery store, there are different levels of intimacy, but it's actually the same process. And it is love.
And another thing that you just mentioned this, but taking responsibility, and you essentially said that too, when we take responsibility, it's not just the other thing, it's not the blame game. I mean, that's just so important.
The only possibility is for we each own our own piece of it, because that's the only part I can work on.
Yes.
You have to work on yours.
Right.
And I'm only safe to work on mine when you're working on yours, and you're only safe to work on yours when I'm working on mine.
Yes.
If you're working on mine, I have to be defensive, and
Right,
if I'm working on yours, you're defensive. Well, where does that get us?
Yeah. Lewis, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege having you here. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed having you.
Well, it's such an honor to people who are talking about how do we connect and enhance our energy and our love so that we can each separately and together become more than we are already alone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you to my wonderful crew. I appreciate you guys. And we'll see you next time.